Hello horror hounds. The film under consideration today, Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, was one of those caught up in the video nasties debacle in the UK in the early 80s, and it was banned. Its UK distributor was even jailed for showing a longer version than the approved BBFC cut, British Board of Film Classification. As you'd expect with some of the company it keeps on the videos nasties list, it's sleazy exploitation of inconsistent quality, but for the gorehounds amongst us, it is fucked up. Known as Nightmare in the US, here it's called Nightmares in a Damaged Brain. Why the fuck wouldn't that be your title? It reminds me of Mario Bava's Bay of Blood, aka Twitch of the Death Nerve. If your movie is also called Twitch of the Death Nerve, call your movie Twitch of the Death Nerve. So I'm not going to refer to this as Nightmare. I'm not going to refer to it as Splash of Blood, which is also known as Nightmares in a Damaged Brain. What an amazingly lurid title, and the film delivers on that. This is directed by an Italian called Romano Scavolone, and for those of you interested in the history of horror and the subgenres of horror, this is really a quite interesting attempt to reconcile the suspense nature of the American slasher with the blood-soaked set pieces of the Italian giallo. For everyone else, it's a nasty, nihilistic piece of exploitation cinema that revels in female nudity, madness, and extreme violence. So, you know, perfect date night fodder. As a brief synopsis, because I don't want to give too much away about what actually happens, the film follows George Tatum, who is a psychotic on an experimental regimen of medication to cure him of night terrors. It's believed that he's cured and he's released into the general populace. He probably visits Times Square and a number of strip joints which trigger violent and sexual visions that contain the imagery of his night terrors. He leaves his follow-up sessions, journeys to Florida, and targets a family that he begins to stalk and make silent calls to their house. To give away any more would do the film a disservice, because I found it did keep me guessing, and it did keep me interested. Seasoned horror fans will see some of this stuff coming before the shoe drops, but perhaps not all of it. The film opens with a real wham bam. I wasn't expecting it. It goes completely for the jugular. It keeps the viewer off balance, wondering whether what they're seeing are hallucinations, dreams, memories, and with such a concentrated and forceful opening, it's almost inevitable that the pace slows down somewhat. There is a major drag in the middle when George, rather than being the focus, moves aside to the periphery of the movie. Whilst he's stalking this house and this household, he becomes on the edges of the film, and we're focusing on the family. Your tolerance for this portion of the movie, which the pacing does slow down, your tolerance is really going to depend on how you take to the characters being presented. None of them really simplistic. The mother is essentially an absentee mother who seems to be suffering from a severe depression. She's either in bed or she's abdicating responsibility for looking after her children onto a babysitter so she could spend some time with her lover on his boat. The little boy in the family, called CJ, is either going to annoy the hell out of you, or he's, like me, he's going to intrigue you. He's clearly a proper little Michael Myers. He is a potential sociopath. I found myself wondering during that section of the film about a potential connection between CJ and the killer, Tatum. Even at one point wondering whether, after a couple of times, because CJ and only CJ sees Tatum, whether the killer is just in the child's mind and it might actually be CJ doing some of these things. Whether or not you're worried about the drag in the middle. The film picks up again, and in the end, the final act even achieves moments, just glimpses of the kind of suspense that John Carpenter brought to Halloween, a film that many people say this is ripping off. I would say that this film is ripping off a whole potpourri of other movies, not just Halloween. Think if Abel Ferrara had directed Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer and set it during Black Christmas. That'll give you some kind of idea of the scuzzy vibe of menace that this film has going for it. It's an uneven piece of work for sure. Certain narrative threads, like Tatum's doctors trying to track him down, don't go anywhere. But the makers have tried to imbue the film with some kind of sense of rhythm and driving towards a denouement by giving it chapters, first night, second night, all the way up to the final night. The final night is undoubtedly when the film picks up again. It's a film that begins with an incredibly shocking opening and ends with a finale that is, in the truest sense, in the Grand Guignol tradition. You won't long forget it after you've seen it. While some of the effects are clearly prosthesis, others are really, honestly, gruesomely realistic. Fans of practical gore will find a lot to revel in here. It may not be art, but Nightmares in a Damaged Brain is certainly compelling and provocative. I got this on Blu-ray from 88 Films, and one note of caution, the sound balance on this is atrocious. The dialogue is so quiet, you'll be ramming the volume up with the controls, and then the screams, and there are many screams throughout this, are so loud and piercing, you'll be once again grabbing the volume, and you'll basically be yo-yoing up and down the volume on this throughout the film. It's unavoidable. This film is certainly one for the gorehounds. If extensive blood and violence, cutthroats, stabbings, decapitations, strangling with cheese wire is not your kind of thing, you really need to leave Nightmares in a Damaged Brain alone. Don't take my word for it. Just as I like to round off every video with alternate viewpoints from Internet Movie Database user reviews, this is no different. Gauss has this to say: if you want blood, you've got it. Nightmare is one of the bloodiest psycho thrillers I have ever seen. The intense end scene in this movie makes Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween look like kindergarten stuff. NB, I watched an old uncut Dutch video version. Besides from the gore, it was not so exciting. The acting was poor and the story was a bit too boring, but if you like 'em bloody, see this one. And finally, from Marcopi 1981, and major spoilers to this, all in one sentence, no punctuation throughout. So turn off now if you haven't seen the movie yet and think you might want to check it out. But Mark Cope 1981 says, I heard about this movie and watched it. George Tatum has a wife named Susan and 3 kids who are annoying. George hacked up his parents as a kid, goes crazy, gets committed, breaks out and terrorizes a babysitter, looking after his kids and kills people. The director did lift many elements out of Halloween and Maniac, but this film is good overall and has inspired other films I like a lot. Pretty good, great blood splash, sounds like a better title. Kim, Tammy, CJ and their babysitter Kathy are given hell by George in an effective film. Susan is good and it's scary and gory. The only way it could have been better is if Kathy, spoiler alert, lived.